Io darei per primo la parola a Martin Curley, che saluto, gli do il benvenuto ufficiale, diciamo, qui a Bologna, anche se lui è arrivato ieri e penso che abbia già apprezzato, diciamo, l'accoglienza, diciamo, di Bologna, e lascerei subito a lui la parola per le Smart City.
Buongiorno, good morning. Unfortunately, I don't speak Italian, but we do have a common language, which is innovation. So I was able to pick up all the innovation buzzwords like magnitudo dell'idea, modillo di business. So I have 9.5 minutes to talk to you about smart cities. So I'm not going to give you a very glitzy corporate presentation. I want to share with you a lot of information, so I'm going to talk a little fast and show you lots of images. And hopefully I can give you some ideas of the problems that cities face, but also parts of the solutions. So we need to think globally around financial, social, and environmental sustainability. And at Intel, we think the cities are at the confluence of 3 megatrends. The first is digital transformations. Intel and other companies are busy with Moore's Law. Every 18 months, we're able to double the computing capacity, and that's delivered at less or equal cost. More and more, we see mass collaboration. We're going to see machine-to-machine collaboration, machine-to-person collaboration, and person-to-person collaboration. Facebook and YouTube are very early examples of mass collaboration, but we'll see much more sophisticated applications and opportunities coming. And last, sustainability is a paradigm that we all need to embrace. So at the middle of these 3 megatrends are sustainable connected cities. Let's talk about sustainability just for a moment. In society, we're moving from a society that's resource-based to one that's knowledge-based. And yet, as we make this transition, the consumption of resources continues to grow and grow. So we have a problem. So if we continue with the rate of resource consumption, we'll need 2 Earths by 2050. At the moment, the estimation is we need 1.3 Earths worth of resources to maintain our current lifestyle. Jose Maria Figueres, who's the former Costa Rican Prime Minister, he said, well, there is no planet B, so we need to do something different. So what's the opportunity and what's the problem? Well, we want to improve quality of life for people. We want to improve GDP growth. And if we're somehow able to bend the curbs around resource consumption and environmental degradation, then maybe we have a solution. So maybe we have the possibility of building better GDP, better lifestyle, while also conserving resources and limiting environmental degradation. This is a key problem in cities. So let me point to potentially one part of the solution. So this is a comparison of the energy efficiency of major industries over the last 30 years. So in automobiles, there's been about a 40% energy efficiency improvement. Airlines, 121%. Lighting is actually quite good, 339%, and this has been driven by companies like Philips with their SL lighting. But if you look at the energy efficiency of computer systems, it's 2.8 million% over the same period. So it's very, very dramatic. So one of the big opportunities is to take this resource that continues to get more powerful, more energy efficient, and substitute it for other areas. And we're starting to see the patterns of how we can do this. We can automate, we can substitute, and we can dematerialize. So what Apple has done to the music industry and what Amazon has done to the book industry, there's a pattern. We use technology to disrupt. We're in a business school. Schumpeter, the Austrian economist, he talked about creative destruction. So we have a lot of creative destruction going on as Moore's Law collides with domains. But if you looked at what happened in music and in book selling, there's a pattern. Yes, the industry is disrupted, but the convenience for the user, the access to music or books is dramatically improved, and the energy efficiency is dramatically improved. So we have an opportunity in many domains, but particularly in cities, to use technology to transform. And we get more convenience, better services, ease of use, and more resource efficiency. So why would we pick cities? Well, today more than 50% of the world's population live in cities. By 2050, 70%. In the history of the planet, we probably have the most spectacular sort of migration of people to cities than we've ever seen. Now, cities today already consume 70% of the world's energy, and they contribute 80% of the world's greenhouse gases. But cities also are centers of entrepreneurship, and they're actually quite efficient. So even cities like London that are dirty, 9 million people, lots of issues, a citizen living in London is actually more resource efficient than somebody living in rural UK. So the cities are, if you want to fix a problem, you're all familiar with Pareto, that 20%, the 20-80% deal. So we could focus on cities and we could solve 80% of the world's sustainability issues. So what are the needs of a sustainable city? Well, everything from healthcare. We know there's a paradigm that needs to happen from making sick people better to keeping well people well, and allowing independent people who are older live independently and be monitored remotely in their homes. We know security is a very big issue. Energy, environment, I'll talk about energy in a second. Transportation is a very significant issue. And of course, we sometimes forget about food and agriculture. How do we feed all these people? But at the center as well is citizens and community services. And I started my slide thinking about, it's not just about environmental sustainability or financial sustainability, it's also about social sustainability. So we could build a roadmap, and unfortunately I don't have time to talk about this, but I would encourage you, as you're exploring the topics today, to think about a roadmap. How do we go from a single smart device to, on the top right hand, a sustainable, interconnected and secure economy, society and environment? So we collectively have to go on a journey. We can't do that in one day, but let's think together about what's the roadmap, how we get there. One of the major issues is, how do you power the urban revolution? So today more than 70% of the energy is consumed in cities. And one thing I would encourage you to think about is the future smart grid, or Bob Metcalfe talks about the internet. Today the energy grid is very hierarchical, and it's a one-way flow from big generators to the consumer. And we are going to see a major shift where actually consumers will self-generate, and there will be bidirectional flow of energy. In fact, in Ireland, we're working to install this, where we have people using smart storage heating, we're using renewable power, we have electric vehicles, and we're building a middleware to enable the smart grid. So this will very much be a user-empowered and a user-powered world of the smart grid. I want to close with telling you some things that Intel is doing in this space, just to give you an idea of what's going on. We have an institute with the City of London and UCL and Imperial. And the things that we're thinking about on your left-hand side here are novel user experiences for citizens. How do we understand the workload the city has to manage? So peak load, cities are designed for average loads, but when you get intense demand, what happens? Does the city break down, or is it able to continue? And we need to think about systems of systems. We need to think about the architecture, the protocols for the city, security and privacy. Data-driven innovation is one of the big opportunities in cities. Business models are hugely important. And this topic of cities has enormous sort of political commitment. And at this institute, we were able to launch this at 10 Downing Street with the Chancellor of the Exchequer, George Osborne. And very recently, the UK government have invested £50 million into the City of London to turn it into a future city. And the objective is to turn London into the world's leading sustainable city, but also to develop then solutions that can be exported around the world. Smaller cities are also doing this. I'm a native of Dublin, and we're working directly with the Lord Mayor, who's very digitally literate. We work with the Innovation Minister, and the universities, and we have a vision of transforming Dublin into a sustainable, connected city. And what the Lord Mayor, he directly chairs a meeting every 6 weeks where he brings together business people, citizens, and universities and industry to actually co-design the future of Dublin. One of the solutions that will be actually launched next week is a solution called City Watch. And this combines data that comes from citizens in real time. It also comes from devices that are mounted on traffic lights in the city. We call this ambient intelligence devices. And it allows the collective and collaborative intelligence of cities, our citizens working with the city to make the city a safer, better place. In Dublin, we're also thinking about the domains. So what are the areas where we need to work on in terms of actually improving services, improving resource efficiency? And this might be useful as a framework. So economy and innovation, of course, is critically important. That's the lifeblood of the city. But equally important is the social aspect. It's community and citizenship. Culture and entertainment, of course. Movement and transport. This is a particular issue for Dublin. We don't have a metro, so how do we fix that? Urban places and spaces, and finally, environmental practices. Now, this is a lot more information than we have time to talk about. But this is a model that we're defining for Dublin, which is a maturity model, where we think about how can we significantly improve the capability of Dublin in different areas like digital access and skills proficiency of the citizens, ubiquitous networks, how do we leverage urban data, how do we foster digital services capability, how do we realize value, and lastly, how do we govern the city? And what we're doing is, and we actually have an Italian PhD student actually who's helping us build this model. And last week we met with citizens and with business people in the city, and they scored the digital maturity of Dublin. Now the score is actually their level 2 maturity, so that's bad news, but the good news is we have lots of room to improve. And the efforts of the city are now focused on actually how do we lift the maturity up to level 3. Last point, what's the size of the prize? So as business people, how big is this opportunity? Well, it's huge. This data is from the UK Technology Strategy Board. The estimated annual value of the global market for integrated city systems by 2030 is £200 billion, about 250 billion euros. The expected global investment in city infrastructure over the next 10 years, 6.5 trillion, more than 7 trillion euros. So this is a huge market, probably one of the biggest markets and opportunities in the world. The last point I'd make, probably the biggest issue in cities is not the technology, it's not the problems, it's the business model. All around the world we're talking to cities. They want the technology, they want the solutions, but they can't afford them. So I think one of the biggest opportunities you have today as you consider the exercise, coming up with an innovative business model that allows easier adoption of these technologies. So don't fall in love with the technology, fall in love with the business model. And a simple definition of a business model is how do you define, how do you design for, how do you create, and how do you capture value? And the business model will only be successful if you win, the city wins, and the citizens win. So that's what we need to design for sustainability. I think for innovation, if we design with the citizen in mind and they're part of the process, then we'll get much easier adoption and we'll get value co-created. So let me finish there. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks, Martin.